Welcome back to the webinar on the use of the SAFIRE and the SATIRE for conducting authentic assessment with families and caregivers. Before you get started, print out the activity sheets and the pair to complete during this portion of the webinar. Part 4 will focus on key indicators of a quality interview, as well as provide an opportunity to reflect on your personal style. Strategies that will enhance your capacity to gather relevant and meaningful information to support authentic assessment will be explored. Both of these will make a qualitative difference to your interview using the SAFIRE and SATIRE. Part 4 of the webinar will focus on your skills as an interviewer. We will look at communication styles and how this supports a quality interview. We will also focus on gathering robust information during interviews through questions focused on engagement, independence, and social relationships, otherwise known as the EISR. Although this portion can be done independently, you will have a much richer understanding if you complete this segment in collaboration with other providers. If you have not already done so, pause the recording and download Activity 4.1. You may also download the optional activity at this time. Reflect on your role as an interviewer of families and teachers. What are the qualities that you possess that have a positive impact in your discussions? What is missing? What would you like to learn more about in order to support your focus on family, caregiver, and teacher assessment practices? Pause the recording and record your reflections on the activity sheet. Discuss your responses with your colleagues. An optional activity is available for you to complete. This is a quick and easy questionnaire to explore your learning style and contribute to your reflections on your interview practices. In a 2009 article entitled The Routines-Based Interview, A Method for Gathering Information and Assessing Needs, Robin McWilliam and Amy Casey explore interviews and provide insight to this approach. One of the three main outcomes of an RBI is to establish a relationship with the family member or caregiver. This is also true of the SAFIRE and SATIRE. In the article, McWilliam and Casey suggest that at the core of this relationship is the construct of family-centeredness. Family-centeredness in early intervention that addresses two issues: how to interact with families and what to do with the families. Family-centered interactions have been found to be positive, responsive, oriented to the whole family, friendly, and sensitive, as well as enabling and empowering. Family-centered actions include assessing family needs and helping them to meet those needs. McWilliam and Casey identified 10 key indicators of a quality interview that, if used as intended, should be invisible and embedded in a conversation for best results. At the core of many of these indicators is the interviewer and their ability to convey a welcoming and open conversation. Let's explore the 10 indicators of a quality interview. Active listening is more than just an "okay" and "I see." It includes repetition of what was said and request for expansion or clarification of what was said in order to demonstrate that the parent is being heard. In-depth follow-up questions are sometimes referred to as the fly-on-the-wall scenario. When you can see the picture clearly, you have more than likely asked those in-depth questions. Some people describe this as painting a picture of the activity. Continuing the conversation speaks to the fact that this should always feel like a conversation and not be bogged down in the process of the practice. Proactive questioning about child development includes the knowledge of the interviewer to ask both relevant, age-appropriate questions, as well as asking about expectations for the future. Smart questions demonstrate that the interviewer gets the family, that the interviewer knows when to ask questions about feelings, and also knows when the questions are too intrusive. The nonverbal behaviors of the interviewer convey an understanding and acceptance of what is being said without judgment. Nodding, smiling, and eye contact are all indicators of nonverbal communication. An interviewer understands that a child's engagement in day-to-day activities do not happen in a bubble. It is critical to understand who else is around and what they are doing in relationship to the child and the activity in order to fully explore each time of day. An interviewer seeks to understand how the caretaker feels or views what is happening. It is about perspective, including how the parent feels or what they think from the person who is actually experiencing the situation. Managing the conversation is critical to ensure that the time agreed to is adhered to, while still getting the most out of the conversation. Empathizing with the caregiver is an indicator that supports the interviewer conveying understanding and support of both the challenges and successes that the family experiences. This is what leads to the development of trust. Pause the recording now and compare your list to the 10 key indicators that McWilliam and Casey identified. What would you like to add to your list? The RBI, the SAFIR, and the Everyday Routine section on the IFSP are the 3 ways Part C providers in Maryland can gather information for the family assessment. Each of these practices supports having conversations with the people that spend the most time with the child. However, at the core of all of these practices is the interviewer's skills in gathering robust information around engagement, independence, and social relationships. Let's explore the EISR. One of the most critical pieces to the RBI and the SAFIR and SATIRE is the skill of gathering information from the family that provides a rich and robust description of what the child is doing in the context of their day-to-day activities. Robin McWilliam suggests that we do this in conversation with the family, by understanding the EISR, the engagement, independence, and social relationships. This holds true regardless of the type of interview that you are doing. Gathering information on family routines using either the RBI, the SAFIR, or the Everyday Routines page on the IFSP is required as part of the IFSP process. The EISR is a critical component to the parent or caregiver interview in the authentic assessment process. There is a direct connection to the information you are gathering around engagement, independence, and social relationships, and the information needed to provide meaningful routines-based interventions. The types of questions asked about engagement is directly related to gathering information about outcome 2, since we are asking about how a child learns and uses what he learns to be able to successfully participate in activities. The types of questions asked about independence is gathering information directly related to outcome 3, how the child is able to get his needs met, take care of himself, and remain safe. The types of questions asked about social relationships is directly related to outcome 1, how the child relates and interacts with people around him. So if we are asking rich questions about engagement, independence, and social relationships during a family or caregiver interview for each routine and activity, then we will have quality information to age anchor and complete an accurate assessment summary for each child. As we look at the entire IFSP process, family and caregiver interviews provide information to complete much of the IFSP and IEP documents. They provide us information on strengths and needs, on concerns, priorities, and resources, as well as gathering parental input. They give us information to create functional outcomes and goals. They support a discussion around natural environments and least restrictive environments. They help us to complete our assessment summary and the child outcome ratings. And finally, they help us to determine any community connections that family might need. And how do we do this? We ask open-ended questions to begin the discussion. Questions like, how does your day start? What happens next? With the SAFIR and SATIRE, you might say, tell me about mealtime. We then ask follow-up questions related to engagement, independence, and social relationships. Questions like, tell me more about how she feeds herself. What are you doing during this time? What are you saying to her? Follow caregivers' responses by refocusing or reframing questions to elicit more specific and descriptive information. Listen. The parent or caregiver should be doing most of the talking. And finally, embed knowledge of development in the questions so that we are clearly seeing a picture of what the child is doing and how they are participating compared with same-age peers. This sounds easier than it is, but the beauty in it is that no interview will ever look the same. The interview is guided by your personal style, your knowledge and skills, and your professional judgment. Your questions will be guided by your knowledge and skills and the responses the caregiver provides you. The professional judgment you use as to which path you take during an interview is unique and personal to the relationship that is developing. In 1992, McWilliam and Bailey began this conversation about engagement. Engagement is everything. It is the overall big picture of the routine, and therefore, the questions asked during an interview need to be thorough. There are many behaviors exhibited during routine activities that cross domains and are not captured through a developmental evaluation. If these are not explored through a family assessment, they may never be identified or considered as strengths. And if we don't know how a child is using the skills identified during an evaluation, we may never identify a functional need. An engaged child is participating meaningfully, possibly with adults, other children, or objects. Their participation is developmentally and contextually appropriate, which means their level of competence will depend on their developmental level and on the demands of the routine. McWilliam's work with Dunst and Bailey and others move to measurement of the sophistication of engagement. Knowing and understanding the concept of engagement helps an interviewer go beyond discussing a child's active or passive participation in the activity or routine. It is why the interviewer needs to ask questions that go below the surface. Since engagement is everything, then it is important to get information during each routine of where it is happening, the activities that fall within the routine, the materials that are present and used, and the people that are involved during each routine. It is also important to gather information about what the child is doing, how they are doing it, and what other people involved are doing during the routine. Although time of day is not the focus, how long a child stays with an activity can provide insight to engagement. The SATIRE and SATIRE provide you with names of the routines. However, there still could be activities that the family mentions that may not be typically associated with that time of day on the SAFER. When mealtime is discussed, the parent may mention an interactive play activity that occurs during that time. Exploring that within the mealtime routine would be critical to understanding the child and family, but also to ensure functional and meaningful interventions. The focus on independence seems natural in our questions about day-to-day activities. A typical way to gather this information would be to ask what the child is doing on their own, and what they need help with. But consider these other questions as we gather information about independence. How does that child ask for help? And then how do they respond to help once they get it? What does the parent want them to be able to do? It is important to understand how independent the parent wants the child to be during the routine. When we are gathering information about social relationships, we are looking at both interactions as well as communication. We need to establish who is present during each routine so that we can understand how the child is interacting, responding, and initiating during that time of day. We also need to know the manner in which the child is communicating and responding to the communication of others. We need to know the mode, the complexity, and the sophistication of the language the child is using. We want to know the complexity of the language others are using with the child in order to know what they are understanding. Asking for examples is helpful when gathering this information. The Profile Across Routines of Engagement, the PAIR, was developed by Robin McWilliam in 2015 in order to help interviewers understand the qualitative information gathered during the EISR process. It reflects the content that is needed for an accurate picture of the routine. This supports the belief that good questions provide robust information across multiple EISR areas to create a thorough and consistent picture of the uniqueness of each child and family. And interviewers with knowledge and skills to ask the questions, as well as the interpersonal relationship-building capacity, will gather rich, thorough information to contribute to the IFSP and IEP development. Download a copy of the PAIR and the PAIR video activity sheet. Spend some time reviewing the PAIR. Watch the video and record the questions and responses that you hear. Identify the EISR area or areas from the response. What other questions would you have asked? Choose at least 2 video clips and complete the PAIR activity sheet. Whether we're helping families or teachers, it is important to remember the national goal for early intervention is for children to be functioning and happy members of society. In order to do that, they need to be as independent as possible, to have social relationships, and to be able to participate in their home, school, and community. The home, school, and community routines are where we measure the success. When children can enjoy these routines, meet the demands of the routines with less adult assistance, understand other people, and do all this in a happy and appropriate manner, we can say the outcomes are positive. We have reached the end of part 4 of this webinar. The final section of this webinar will focus on developing functional and meaningful outcomes and goals and supporting the completion of the assessment summary.